Okay, welcome everyone. Really lovely to see everyone joining us and to welcome our guest, Jack Aghion. He has been a guest with us before and is one of our popular guests, so I've invited him back in. You may recall that the last time we had him here, we were talking about the battles of Tobruk and how the Allies stopped and defeated the Nazis, which saved almost 1 million Sephardi Jews in the Middle East. So I'm sure that I think most of you were there, and if you haven't, you probably watched it. It was fascinating. So this time Jack is going to be talking a little bit different. He's going to be talking about his family history. And as you know, I'm very passionate about having our stories recorded so people know about our background and our history. So I'm really grateful to Jack, who's joining us today to talk about his family and relating it back to the Sephardi history. So I'm just going to pop myself now onto mute and welcome Jack, and thank you for sharing. So Jack will be talking for about 20-25 minutes, and then if anyone has any questions after, we can ask questions and then go from there. Okay, thank you, Jack, and welcome.
Thank you, Joanne, for inviting me to speak on the history of my family. It's the story of a Sephardi family, and a very typical story or history of a Sephardi family. I was lucky to have been able to collect a lot of information, and I'll tell you as I speak, as this came to be about. But it is very typical of all Sephardi families. Of course, Sephardi, Sepharad, meaning from Spain originally, and in most, it's about 600 years originally. And in our case, the family settled in Egypt, and that's where I was born. So I'll tell you a little bit of that part, because the family was in Egypt for 250 years before we were kicked out by Gamal Abdel Nasser, as many of you who are seeing on the screen can attest. And it was a family that had done fairly well in Egypt, in Alexandria. Although Jews had the status of dhimmis, so they were second-class citizens, but somehow in Muslim Egypt, Jews did fairly well under from the time of Muhammad Ali, which was when Egypt had, in a way, separated from the Turkish Ottoman influence. I mean, they were still a province of Turkey, or within the Ottoman Empire, but were a bit more independent. There had been some revolt, and anyway, so Muhammad Ali was appointed as a Qadir from Istanbul, and a very progressive man, and he built up Egypt to become a very modern country. And in that time, the Jews then were respected. Apart from the odd pogrom that would take place, but they built up the country, and in fact, there would have been a population of about equal to Australia of Jews, say 100,000 Jews between the main two centers of Cairo and Alexandria. And as I had mentioned to you, the work of the Australian soldiers in Tobruk, who became known as the Rats of Tobruk, and it was because of them, the Anzacs, that it saved the Jewish population in 1941-42, when the Nazi advance was stopped, so that my parents did not finish in concentration camps. which would have been the case, really, as Joanne mentioned, of close to 1 million Jews, because they would have marched right through the whole Middle East, Palestine as it was then known. They were after the Suez Canal to control the navigational routes and also the oil of Saudi Arabia and so on. And so I was born after that. I was born in Alexandria, 1946. And I remember always that my father spoke of the fact that the family had come from Spain many, many years before. And I had asked him which part of Spain, and he wasn't quite sure. He said, "Oh, the province of Leon," and maybe that's why the name, because the name actually used to be Agion, Aelion, and in 1853 it was changed to Agion to be more pronounceable in Arabic. And so he said, "Yes, Aelion, so we must have come from Leon, the province of Leon." And yes, so it was very much, normal life, a very pleasant life. Members, it was a very English-based um, society. And so you had the English schools, and they were very much based on the traditional English schools, so of Eton and so on. I went to a French school, Lycée Français, and because generally the Egyptian Jewish community spoke French, and so Lycée Français. But in 1956, with the events of the Suez Crisis, things changed. And anything that was French or English, because they were the invading troops who were trying to retake the Suez Canal, which Gamal Abdel Nasser had seized, but including Israel. So any English, French was then basically thrown out of the country, and Jews, because of the association with Israel, were also no longer tolerated. In fact, many were arrested, fearing that they were spies for Israel and so on. So life, which had been wonderful under the various kings from Muhammad Ali all the way to King Farouk. King Farouk was deposed in 1952, and this is when the army took over, and Gamal Abdel Nasser rose up and took over some 2 years later. In 56, we've got the Suez Crisis. So that beautiful life in Egypt for a Sephardi family was coming to an end. And we were lucky that we had Dutch nationality, because Jews were not allowed to take Egyptian nationality, so we were stateless. A big number of Jews were stateless. And then you were able to purchase nationalities. And so you had the Italians and Greek Jews, but also in our case Dutch. And I'll tell you why. Back in at the turn of the century, when the Austro-Hungarian Empire was losing its power, and finally the World War One, our family had been Austrian. They had bought that nationality. And it was important in Egypt to have an international passport, because that protected you under the dhimmi regime. And in our case, the family decided to, after the Austrian passport was no longer of any use, they looked for any connection of the family to be able to prove another nationality. And somebody remembered that at some stage in the past, many, many years before, in the 1700s, we had a rabbi who was Dutch. And he, in fact, was the chief rabbi of Amsterdam. So the family, who were quite well off, appointed solicitors and various researchers who then proved to the Dutch government that, yes, in fact, our family came from Holland back in the 1700s. So in the early 1900s, our family became Dutch. And that protected us at the time of 1956, when in fact anyone was being thrown out of the country. So if you were stateless, you were just given a laissez-passer, which was effective for 3 months and would allow you to travel somewhere as a refugee to any country that would accept you. But having a Dutch passport, we were able to travel to Belgium, where we had family. We stayed there for a little while and got a visa to Australia. And that is what saved us, the fact that we had a Dutch uh, ancestor, a rabbi, the chief rabbi of Amsterdam, which I will come back to later on. And so we came to Australia, and life we rebuilt, and it was beautiful. Came back with only 10 pounds, Egyptian pounds, which I was saying to one of the grandchildren, we only came with 10 pounds in 1959. And that grandchild at the age of 15 very cleverly went through on his little iPhone, worked out the rate of inflation and the conversion rates between different countries and said, "Oh, you didn't just come with 10 pounds, you came with $3,000. And so that was interesting, but it was not much still. So we rebuilt, and my father always spoke of our background, Sephardi, from Spain, and it was always at the back of my mind. Anyway, life went on, and didn't think that much about it until I had time. So once I retired, I started thinking, well, okay, what's our background? Where did we originally come from? And by then the internet had started, so it was a bit easier to start doing research. And I thought, well, it'd be good to have a family reunion, because although there isn't much written information, there is a lot of oral history which is passed on from generation to generation. And so in 2009 in Katoomba, just outside of Sydney in the Blue Mountains, we had a family reunion. And it was Agion being my father's side and Seton being my mother's side. And we had 50 people who came. And it was amazing because some people that we didn't know, we all came together and we were an instant family, a fabulous time spent there. And we recounted old family tales, and I collected a lot of information. One family came from France, and they said, it's a good thing that you've had this reunion because we didn't know there were any Agions in Australia. We just saw it on the internet. Somebody passed it on to us. And we are Agion from grandparents and so on. And they decided to come all the way from Paris to Australia for that family conference. And they said, we have been doing a lot of research overseas. We have a family in Colombia, we have family in Panama, and they've been doing also a lot of research. There is a family in Turkey, family in Greece, family, and I found out that there were Agions everywhere, quite a few in Israel and many in America. And so Michel Danon, who was from Agion background, actually his wife is as well, but very distant, if I may say so. And told me that we came from a little northern Spanish town called Agion. Agion. And he said, this is where the name comes from. It is in the area of Segovia, which is the old province of Leon and Castile. So in a way, my father was right. We did come from the province of Leon, but the name Agion and Agion before came actually from that little township in the northern Spain, about 100 kilometers north of Madrid, that was called Agion. And he said, look, it'd be good to go and see that place. And I said, yes, I'd love to. And the next thing, after a little while, I found myself on a plane and meeting Michel Danon and his wife Susan in Madrid. We hired a car and we chuffed off and went to see that little family town of Agion. And we couldn't believe our eyes. The place was looking the same as it would have looked 500 years ago when the family left it, with the cobblestone and the old buildings, and which had just been renovated a little bit here and there, but it kept its cachet of the Middle Ages time, and when the family lived. So when we walked on the cobblestones, you almost felt as if you were walking in the footsteps of our ancestors. And it was a wonderful, wonderful feeling. And from that, the thought was, well, we've had the family reunion in Katoomba. Why not organize one in Agion, in Spain, where we all came from? And so it came to pass, and that's exactly what happened. So 5 years after 2009, the first family reunion, there was a second one in Agion. We also found out that in Agion, the pronunciation, because it's a little bit more towards the Basque area, so more French background, it's pronounced there as Agion. So the L and the Y, and they pronounce it Agion. And then we understood where Agion came from because of that Agion. And we had in 2014 another family reunion. And this time we had family that came from some 12 different countries. We had 50 people who came. And again, people who never had met, but were just interested in the family history. And we met. We had a wonderful time. We had one member who happened to be in the intelligence in Israel and very much involved with the protection of airports. And the next thing, we had people who turned up who seemed to be friends of his who, he asked if they could join in, and on the last day, and I think there was a meeting, there was maybe some spies were, clandestine spy meeting took place within the family reunion. I have to tell you a bit about the background of Agion, which will tell you a bit about the background of our family, because there's been Jewish presence in Spain for time immemorial. So right from the Carthaginians, from before the Romans, and so on. Mainly they were on the ports, on the sea, on the coast, for trading purposes. And the Jews there then were able to, because they had other family members in other countries, they spoke many languages, they were able to trade, and they were always very useful for the country. And So basically, you had a Catholic country when the Visigoths converted to Catholicism. But then in the year 711, there was a conquest, and it was the Moors who and the Arabs. The Arabs, together with the Moors, who were descendants from the Berbers of Morocco, who crossed the Straits at Gibraltar, and very quickly conquered the whole of Spain. In fact, it only took them 4 years to conquer the total Spain, except for one part, which I'll tell you in a minute. But then they found that the Jewish population, who by that time had been very much downtrodden by the Catholic faith, uh, the social orders, etc., a lot of pogroms against Jews, were useful for them because they had conquered the whole of Spain with a very small army. So as they conquered across, they would then put the ones who were the oppressed, the Jews, in charge to control the different cities. And they went all the way to the end, except for one certain small area around Santiago. You know, the Camino de Santiago, which is the walk through Spain of 1,000 kilometers, which finishes in Santiago. And it actually recollects or remembers the Reconquista, the return of the Catholic faith, who then pushed back the Moors, the Muslims. Now, it took 4 years for the conquest of Spain, and it took almost 800 years to push the Muslims out of Spain. And this happened finally at Granada, where you had the two kings, king and queen. They were known as the Catholic kings, actually, and that was Isabella and Ferdinand II. And they finally conquered and took over. Now, our family in Agion, it was a little township Jewish settlement.
Jack, sorry to interrupt you. We've just got a few more minutes, so we're going to be wrapping it up soon. We've already used up time.
Yep.
I just wanted to see if anyone had any questions before Jack sort of finishes up in the last. Do you want to just put up your hand if you have a question at all? Oh, wait a minute. There's got a question. Just a
Maybe
moment.
when I finish, or would you like me?
Yeah, well, I'm just because we're running out of time.
Okay.
That's why I thought I'll just see if anyone had any. Viv, do you want to ask your question?
They were into winemaking, money lending, the usual Jewish things, and they did fairly well there. And until, of course, the exile from Spain in 1492. So, any questions?
Yes, Viv, I've unmuted you. Yes.
It's not a question, it's a comment that there was a Jewish school named as the Agion school. And I went there, and I even remember a teacher, Mademoiselle Aghion, but she went to the lycée, to the Jewish lycée juif, lycée juif, and she was, I think, the headmistress of the school, and that was Mademoiselle Agion, and I'm sure Jack will comment on that too.
Yes, so back in Alexandria, and the Agion family had done particularly well. They were into banking and owning lands, and so they were very involved with the community parts where the synagogue, the beautiful synagogue in Alexandria, which has just been renovated, and it's they were very much behind with the other families in paying for it. Also, the hospital, l'Hôpital Juif, they were behind that. There was also the orphanage, Agion.
That's right. Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Also, there was a school. And when you say this was a very big school, because I saw it, and it was about 5 or 6 stories high, a very large building, which is now, of course, Arabic school, who has been just taken over. And but I saw it in 2009 when I went back to Alexandria. So
Yeah.
I'm delighted that you've mentioned that you have been a student of that,
Yeah.
because it's part of our history. Yes.
And also, Mrs. Gamil was a teacher in that school,
Okay.
in the high school. It was up the top, the boys, and yeah, very happy memories and old memories coming back.
Well,
Thank you, Jack.
And Mrs. Gamil, her sister, married an Agion, didn't she?
That's right, Claire.
Claire.
That's it.
And so Claude's mother and father,
Yeah.
Clement.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Claude
Yeah.
Yeah.
Berman. Yep.
Yeah. Can I just ask, we just got another minute or so. Did anyone else have any other questions? Just so you know, Jack, I don't know if you're aware, I may have mentioned to you that my grandfather's family all came from Spain. And having listened to you, I'm thinking I need to go. I don't know if my dad knows enough information, but it's I'd like to find out a little bit more. Very good.
Researchers that you can appoint, and yes,
Correct.
we did appoint a researcher, found that the family had stayed longer than the exile. They were found out by the Inquisition.
Yes.
4 members were burnt at the stake.
Wow.
In 1560. So that's when the family, I presume, would have departed Spain.
Yeah.
Now, a beautiful country, and I could have spoken for hours. It's a pity those 20 minutes.
I know, it goes by so quick. It's so good. But, this is what's so good. And, we get everyone's stories. Last time we had Marcel, and she's spoken twice as well. And it's just, the stories are just so interesting. And it's so important to have it recorded and available for other people to listen to. So I just want to thank you, Jack. I really appreciate, giving up your time this afternoon to share your family history, which is so interesting. And also to thank everyone for joining us today. It's always lovely to see all those beautiful faces. So thank you. And I will be uploading this soon to our YouTube channel and sharing it. So thank you, everyone, and have a good afternoon.
Good.
Thank you, Jack.
I want to say
Thank
thank
you.
you. And Jack, I was picturing it as you said it.
Exactly.
It was beautiful.
Fantastic. Thank you again, everyone, and thank you, Jack.
Thank you.